Welcome to Literary Latte, the podcast with a Southern accent on writing. I'm Lynda Bouchard, and it's time for your jolt of literary inspiration. My guest today is the award-winning author, Rea Frey, whose new novel titled Because You're Mine is full of plot twists and unpredictable characters. You may know Rea from her debut novel, Not Her Daughter, which launched her into the fiction market and onto bestseller lists. Her writing ethic is one every beginning writer should adapt as a blueprint. Today, Rea will talk about how she wrote her first novel and what it's like getting your debut novel optioned for a movie. Then we'll go outside the book and inside her writing life, and we'll get to all of it and much more with Rea Frey right after this from our sponsor. Don't go anywhere. This episode is sponsored by Macintosh Bookshop and the Beaufort Bookstore, two of the best independent bookstores in the South, located in Beaufort, South Carolina. They carry books from the Civil War era, popular fiction, and everything Southern. And they carry all of the titles by guests on this show. So be sure to stop by both locations the next time you're in Beaufort, South Carolina. Now on to the show. Joining me from Nashville, Tennessee is Rea Frey, one of today's most accomplished fiction writers. Her new novel, Because You're Mine, is a gut-wrenching mystery with a heartbreaking and unexpected ending. It asks the question, how well do we really know our friends? This is Rea's second work of fiction. Her debut novel, Not Her Daughter, garnered praise from reviewers and fellow best-selling authors and has been optioned for a movie. Her previous books were nonfiction, focusing on health, cheating boyfriends, and detoxing before pregnancy. Today, we'll get into Rea's writing life and why she switched genres. We'll discuss what starting a business and launching a book have in common and where she gets the ideas for her novels. Rea also has some terrific advice for every writer. Rea, welcome to Literary Latte. It is such a treat to have you here.
It is so lovely to be here. Thank you for such a generous introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. And congratulations on Because You're Mine.
Thank you so much.
This is a riveting book. So give us a quick snapshot of it and a synopsis, if you would.
So yeah, Because Your Mine really starts with one question, or it started for me with one question, and that was, what would happen if you died and left your child without a guardian? When I wrote this, I was kind of in the midst of raising an only child, and I was surrounded by mothers raising only children. And we would sit around and talk about, what would happen if one of us died and left our child without a guardian, if we didn't have a spouse, if we didn't have close family members, and we had to trust one of our friends around us. So the book takes place from three different points of view. We have Lee, who's kind of a single recovering alcoholic. And, the thought of her child being left without a guardian is one of her greatest fears. She's raising a 7-year-old on the spectrum, son Mason, who I love in the book. He's a little bit of comedic relief in the book. And she kind of finds herself falling for her son's occupational therapist and homeschool teacher, Noah. Noah is a wonderful, he's great with children. He has kind of his own dark past and loss in his life. And then Lee has her best friend, Grace, who's also single and raising an only son. And when the book starts, all three of these characters have secrets. So kind of fast forward, these girls, Lee, Grace, and a couple of their friends decide to go on a little weekend getaway to the mountains. And Noah insists that he can stay with Mason. Lee is very nervous about leaving him. She's never left her child on her own or on his own before, but she's like, what's the worst that could happen? And then 48 hours later, someone is dead. So the book really explores in this aftermath, after one of these characters has died, all of these secrets kind of come to light, these pasts are revealed. And the question that we're left with, which is what you said in the introduction, is how well do we ever really know our friends? Kind of a messy little explanation, but if you've read the book, it's kind of, I've had a lot of reviewers say, this is a really hard one to sum up without giving anything away. Because it does have a little bit of a shocker of an ending and kind of allows you to go back and look at the book in an entirely different light once you're done.
And before we dive into the meat of it, you share a very personal author's note at the beginning of Because You're Mine.
I did.
Why was this important to you?
Well, that's a great question. So, the author's note it deals with a sexual assault that I experienced when I had just turned 15 years old. And I feel like in the movement, the Me Too movement, I stayed very quiet. When I dealt with my own sexual assault, years and years and years ago, I really worked through that. I worked, I got into self-defense. I worked with the therapist. I poured myself into writing. So I kind of never saw myself as a victim, but really used that to, just kind of harness different strengths and just really understand that had nothing to do with me and that I couldn't control his actions, however confusing that they seemed. And so this book really deals with pretty big subject matters. We have sexual assault, we have depression, we have suicide, we have addiction. And I thought it was important to kind of highlight that we think of the word assault in a specific type of way, that it's just this like horrible, ugly thing. But sexual assault can be confusing. It can be someone with someone that you know very, very well. It can be not all ugly. It can be very, very confusing. And what happened with me was very confusing because I liked this boy. I trusted him. I continued in a relationship with him after this incident until it all imploded. And it was really confusing to me. And it was something I felt a lot of shame about and did not talk about forever. And I don't talk about it. I think I kind of wanted to write this so I could release it as part of my story and it not have any sort of power over me, but it's part of who I am, but I don't feel like it's something that happened to me anymore.
I'm sure others look at that and say, oh, yes, I'm not the only one. So thank you for that, Rea. The novel is set in Nashville and areas in and around Asheville,
yes,
North Carolina.
Nashville.
So why did you decide to set the book in those places?
Yeah, when I first was writing this book, I actually set it in Atlanta. And then I started looking at it and I'm like, why don't I just write about Nashville, someplace that I know very, very well? I think there's a great community here. And it was really fun. I've never written about a place that I live in. So it was I thought it was very fun to kind of create this environment that I'm very familiar with and get to highlight certain businesses or locations that I frequent often. And then Asheville, North Carolina, I had gotten the idea for this book actually going to a little place right outside of it called Black Mountain. And I just the book starts off with someone falling off of a mountain. And I had this vision when I was hiking of that happening. And I just, and then again, someone leaving their child without a mother. So it kind of snowballed this idea. So I wanted to take those two places and just write a book around them. And it was a really fun experience.
Yeah, and there's that juxtaposition of like Black Mountain is such a bucolic, peaceful town, and then to have something so tragic happen there, that's that dichotomy there going on. You never think of anything bad happening in Black Mountain.
No, and I fictitiously put this giant mountain behind this real bed and breakfast that I use in the book because there is no big mountain right behind it. But yes, it was just, you associate going to the mountains and having like a lovely getaway and not thinking about tragedy striking. So I'm glad I've ruined Black Mountain for myself and readers everywhere.
No, it's probably going to help their tourism.
Well, here, let's hope. Let's hope so.
So, Rea, this book revolves around a lot of secrets and lies and our willingness to trust people. In fact, in the first chapter, you say that the character Grace's entire world is shrink wrapped. It's rather a cautionary tale. So talk about that a little bit and the way those secrets are revealed in that shrink-wrapped world.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're all pretty dichotomous in how, I mean, just how we present ourselves to the world and then what's really going on. I feel like, we all have these pasts that we either spin to kind of tell a certain story, or we ignore, or we pretend that everything's fine when it's not. And for Lee, one of the main characters, she's kind of a master at this and just presenting the front that she's got it all together. She's a successful hairstylist. She is a recovering alcoholic. She has not had a boyfriend in forever, but she's pouring everything into raising her son. But she's drowning from these secrets that she's keeping with her past. And Grace, her best friend, also has a secret that she's not revealing. And then Noah does as well. And I think that, I mean, again, we all have pasts, we all have tragedies, we all have stories. And I've just always found it really interesting, especially in the age of social media, how we present this pretty, photoshopped picture to the world, but we're not talking about, what's really going on below the surface, the pain that's there, how it's affecting us now, and how we sometimes focus so much on the past, even though that has no bearing on our present or future, but we act like it does. And for these characters, I feel like they're so tied to who they were in the past that it's really affecting who they are in the present.
And they say that writing reveals more about the author. What do you think your work reveals about you?
See, that's such an interesting question. I've never been asked that before. And, in my first book, Not Her Daughter, which was about a kidnapping, I find that I really write a lot about motherhood and relationships and kind of these dysfunctional families. I've been asked, like, did you have a terrible childhood? I've been asked that over and over again. And ironically, I did not. I mean, my parents are two of my best friends. They're still married. They've always been there. So I don't know. I think my work reveals about me that I'm a very curious person. I'm a very empathetic person and very, very, very open-minded. I've worked a lot with prisoners on death row who have done, who have been accused of doing these unspeakable acts. And I've still seen and found the humanity in them. I don't feel like any of us should be judged based on one act. I think we are all humans. We're all born, these kind of innocent beings. And then I'm very interested in what has to happen along the way for you to make these horrible choices and where that's coming from. So I'm interested in kind of digging and seeing what people are capable of and why they do the things that they do and why they pretend to be something that they're not.
And there's so many layers to these characters. So for the police procedural aspects of your novel, do you have contacts in the force? And you just alluded to working with prisoners in the prison system. So do you have contacts there that can help you tap into that?
I do. For this one, there wasn't a lot of, police involvement. But for my third book that I'm working on, it is pretty heavily based. There's a lot of, detective work and police procedural things going on. So yes, I have someone locally actually who, especially for this third book, I've been sending him stuff nonstop. And he's kind of walking me through, how things are done. And I always think that in fiction, you want to make it realistic, but it is fiction. So I try not to get too wrapped up in like, this is exactly how it would go step by step, and make it more about the characters and the plot and like their reasoning versus, a strict how done it novel. Like I write more of like why done it novels. It's because I'm more interested in the why than the how.
Love that. So what scenes did you enjoy writing the most? And on the flip side, what did you find the most challenging scenes to write?
Interesting. Again, this book changed so much. It's almost hard to have a clear view because it started out as a little bit more of a women's fiction book, and then we switched it to more of a suspense book. But I loved, because I do love the mountains so much, that the very first scene, the prologue of the book, was something that was written very early on. And though it's tragic, I really did enjoy kind of setting that up. All the scenes with the girls in the mountains, I really loved. And any kind of interaction between Grace and Mason, Mason is the 7-year-old, or Lee and Mason, I enjoyed writing as well. Of course, harder scenes to write are ones, around loss. That again, the heavier subject matters. Again, as we get to know these characters, not to give anything away, but there are some dark secrets that kind of come out, and going to that place as a writer is always interesting. But I enjoy. There's not ever a scene in a book that I'm like, oh, I don't want to write this, or I don't enjoy this part of it. Like I love all of it because it really does encompass, I feel like, the human experience. When you're writing a book, you're kind of going through all of the emotions and all aspects of humanity. So I really enjoy all of it.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Literary Latte, and I'm Lynda Bouchard. My guest is the amazing award-winning author, Rea Frey. So let's talk a little bit about your debut novel, if we could, titled Not Her Daughter. The mass market edition just came out in June, and I understand there's a prospect of a movie deal?
Yes. So I kind of a dream scenario when Not Her Daughter, before Not Her Daughter came out, I did get a movie option deal. So exciting. And since then, we have actually, the production company has decided they want to pivot that into a TV show, which I am fully supportive of. I feel like TV is just kind of where it's at right now, especially with streaming services. And then to top that off, they asked me to write the pilot of the TV series. So that has been so interesting because I am not a screenwriter, but I've loved, trying my hand at something new, and I've had just so much fun with it. So we're kind of just in that stage of them reviewing that and seeing where we go from here. But I'm hopeful that it'll hit the screen sooner rather than later.
Oh, that is so interesting, the way that all evolved and changed.
Yeah.
And so the book, Not Her Daughter, raises the question of what it means to be a mother. So where did that idea come from? And take us through the way you wrote this novel.
Yeah, this story is so special to me because it really kind of changed. I know it sounds cheesy, but it really did change my life completely. Before I wrote Not Her Daughter, I had not touched fiction in 10 years. I'd always written and been a writer, and I really wanted to write novels, but at the time I was not. And I was a mother to a then 5-year-old and almost 5-year-old. And I was traveling for work. I was working 3 jobs, and I'd gotten an idea for this novel. And it started with the question in my head, is kidnapping ever justified? Because I'd noticed as a mom, I'd be in public places and I would see these like parents being so mean to their kids for no apparent reason. And I found myself at many, many times wanting to just like rescue the kid or talk to the kid or even empathize with the parent. And on one of my travels, I was in an airport and I witnessed this exchange between a mother and a child. She was probably 5 or 6 years old. She was all decked out in red dress, red bow, red shoes. And I just wanted to take this child and run and just give her 5 minutes to herself. And I kept thinking, I thought about this girl for forever. I still to this day wonder how she is, because her mother was being so mean to her and so violent and so physical. I, just kept wondering, like, if she's doing this in public, what's going on behind closed doors? So the irony of this story is I had already decided to write a book. I knew my characters' names. I knew the little girl that was going to get kidnapped was named Emma. And this little girl in the airport was named Emma. And so I was like, okay, that's a sign. I have to go home and write this book. So I went home. I quit 2 of my jobs that very week. I gave myself 8 weeks to write the book. I wrote it in a month. Landed an agent. It got into a bidding war, went to auction and landed a 2-book deal with St. Martin's Press. I've never had so much fun writing anything because it just flew out of me. I mean, it was like an out of body experience. I mean, I don't think I could ever repeat it, but, such a crazy, fun story. I mean, whenever you're writing a story about kidnapping, and again, this is a woman who kidnaps a 5-year-old to save her. So it's not your traditional kidnapping for harm. It's kidnapping to hopefully save someone. But I had my own kidnapping scare with my daughter right after I'd written the book. So I was like, oh my God, I brought this on myself. And she was fine. My daughter was fine. It was a misunderstanding with her school. But yeah, it was a really, because at the core of this book, yes, it's a kidnapping story, but as you said, it really questions what a mother really is and kind of the relationships, the sometimes toxic relationships between mothers and daughters, and how we can stay loyal to our mothers even when they hurt us. And again, I had a great childhood with a wonderful mother, and everyone thinks I did not, but I know so many people who have had toxic relationships with their mothers. I've had readers reach out and be like, oh my God, this child was me. I wish I had had someone to kidnap or rescue me. So it's been really interesting to see the response.
And books are precarious things.
Yes.
They go out in the world and do things you don't expect.
Definitely. And I mean,
they take on a life of their own.
They do. And I knew this one was going to be controversial. I mean, I wanted it to spark conversation. I wanted the reader to kind of grapple with possibly empathizing with a kidnapper. I mean, that's, to empathize with a kidnapper is something very strange. And then, the mother character who's not very nice, but as I was writing her, I mean, I empathized with her, and I did steal the real version of this woman that I saw in the airport. I kind of created an actual depiction of the woman that I saw and of the child that I saw and what I imagined their lives to be. But I found myself empathizing with the mother. I'm like, oh, I've been her. I've been Amy on a really bad day, and I've been Sarah, the kidnapper, on a really good day. And, I wanted to show the ugly parts of motherhood and the beautiful parts of motherhood, and, how your children see it all and they love you anyway.
Let's get a little bit to the business of writing, Rea, because in addition to writing novels, you're a brand specialist and a book proposal writer where you help clients refine and hone their message. And so how did this help you when it came to the marketing of your own work?
It's funny. I think as authors, and I feel like most authors can attest to this, it's like you can help other people with stuff, but when it comes to yourself, it's always hardest to promote yourself. But I was lucky enough I did work with a branding agency for a very long time as their editorial director. And then I pivoted to branching out on my own as a book proposal writer. So I've really seen how, the marketing section of a book proposal is so vital. An author platform is so vital. What you are already doing before your book gets published is so important, not so much as a fiction writer, as a nonfiction writer. As a nonfiction writer, I feel like it matters a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it's a constantly evolving, changing thing, and how you promote your books, how you put yourself out there. As you know, there's only so much you can control and how a book is received. So really focusing on things that are going to hopefully move the needle one way or the other is important. And to me, the first step in that, and my biggest piece of advice to writers, aspiring writers, established writers, nonfiction writers, is to truly understand this business. I know so many clients who go into this not knowing anything about the publishing business. I actually just had a call with a potential client who's like, she runs a multi-million-dollar business. She's so successful. And she's like, I'm just going to write a novel and become rich and just do that. And I'm like, okay, good luck. Because right. And even, getting a 2-book deal. I now have a 4-book deal, which is awesome, or a movie deal. People think like, oh my God, you're set. You're just like totally set for life. Not understanding how contracts work, how you get paid, what that really looks like, what's realistic. And I always tell people, when you're getting into this, you have to look at your book as a product to sell on a shelf to people. And knowing who those people are, knowing what problem you're trying to solve for your readers is key. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not solving a problem. If I'm writing a novel, I'm not solving a problem, but you are. If you're writing, like I write suspense novels, so people want to be in suspense or they want to feel certain things, and I have to figure out what that is to connect with them, so they will hopefully pick up my book out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of options out there. It's tricky.
It is. It's great advice because there are so many books being published at any given 24-hour time period.
You're correct.
That it's hard to rise above that noise. So it's important to focus and to know what your goals are, because authors are overwhelmed with too many choices. And so keeping it small is often the best thing to do. Keep it small. It's like dropping a pebble into a pond. It goes outward and your level of influence increases gradually. So how would you encourage non-readers to start reading, darn it?
Are there non-readers out there? I mean, yes, I guess there are non-readers. I mean, I feel like, ironically, I love fiction, but reading isn't only, we do read every day when we're doing texts or emails, but that doesn't count. But, finding a subject that you're really interested in, I think is a wonderful place to start. I read a ton of nonfiction. I'm always interested in kind of self-development or business ideas or just worldviews. So finding things that you really connect with or want to learn more about, I feel like, if you've been brought up in traditional school, you often think of learning as stopping when you stop your education. But you can open a book and be in another world or learn pretty much anything you want to. Pick up a book, any book, and read. Put down the phone and pick up a book. Best thing you could do for yourself.
Absolutely. So in closing, Rea, how would you want readers to feel when they finish reading Because You're Mine?
I want them to be like, what just happened? I want it to, my intention with this book was, once you get done with the book, knowing the truth, if you went back and read the book again, which probably won't happen, but it would be a completely different read. So I almost wanted to include 2 reads in one. They're almost like 2 different books once you know the truth, to give you a different perspective. So I want it to be a little shocking. And I think it is. I haven't had a reader guess what's really going on yet, which is surprising, but.
Ooh, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a great testimony for your for your book. So
I appreciate it.
Well, my guest today has been Rea Frey. Her novel, Because You're Mine, is published by St. Martin's Press and is available at your favorite booksellers. And you'll find a link to Rea's book on Amazon in the show notes. Rea is currently on a national book tour, and there's a link to her website in the show notes also, where you'll find out more about Rea, and you can discover more about her tour schedule. Rea, thank you so much for being my guest and for writing Because You're Mine.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your tribe and be sure to go to Apple Podcasts to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Join me next time for another Southern-laced literary conversation.
You've been listening to Literary Latte with Lynda Bouchard. For more information, visit bookingauthorsinc.com.